I looked up to you when I was becoming a Ranger.
I went in the Army in 1985, originally in the Army Reserves as a 17-year-old. We get to Somalia and we're staying in a hangar, and this was definitely the first time Rangers, Delta, SEALs, Air Force, Task Force 160th slept under the same roof. He looks at me, he goes, "Glad I met you. You're a good leader. Just take care of your men." I'll say this to the day I die, the Ranger leadership model is what worked on October 3rd.
Hello, everybody. It's Eddie Chavez here again with another episode of Operator Debrief. Today, I'm extremely excited to talk with JB, and who was one of the men that I looked up to when I was becoming a Ranger. One of the men who fought in Somalia, and someone that I was hoping that if I went to war someday, that I would make them proud. We're going to talk about his time in regiment. We're also going to talk about some of his time during Somalia and any other times he wants to talk about. And then we're going to talk about, more importantly, as cool as that is, and believe me, that's what I can't wait to hear. But more importantly, what is he doing to help himself and others so that we're not becoming statistics? So, hey, brother, the floor is yours, man. I would like to start. First of all, I think with the little bit of time I got to talk to you, it makes me excited, and it also tells me that I'm probably never going to grow up. So,
You ain't.
So go ahead, brother. Whatever you want to talk about, how you got started, how your story goes.
So I went in the Army in 1985, originally in the Army Reserves as a 17-year-old in high school. I did a split option program, but I was pretty rowdy as a kid growing up outside Philadelphia, way too much time on our hands, way too much drugs, money. I learned how to do masonry as a young kid, so I was making like $400 a week as a 16-year-old in 1985, and I'm like, well, I finished high school. But my grandfather was like, man, if you ain't going to finish high school, you're going in the Army. So the only thing you could do with the GED was basically infantry on the side. So I ended up in Fort Ord, California as a mortarman in a line infantry unit.
Okay.
But I got there and I started to see guys on post that had these scrolls on their shoulder from Grenada and these Ranger tabs, right? I'm like, I'm getting one of them. And they're looking at me like, yeah, right, you're like an 11 Charlie. Well, my squad leader just happened to be cocky enough, but not able to perform. Talk about, I'm going to Ranger School, I'm going to get a slot. So they gave him a chance, and he went and failed the PT test.
Ooh.
And like, it's automatic at 7th. It was in the 7th Infantry Division, and I'm a PFC. And I'm like, I can pass that PT test. I didn't even know what it was, right? And I went and took the Ranger PT test at the Combat Leadership course.
Nice.
And my grader was Jose Gordon, a Ranger legend, a first back grenade raider. And he was the grader. He was stationed in 7th ID as an E5 at the time. And it was 1988. And somehow I managed to pass the PT test, and then I had to go to a pool and take a Ranger swim test, which I had no idea. I didn't even know what an operator was, right? But I ended up passing the swim test and ended up going to Combat Leadership course, which is their 3-week pre-Ranger, right? And for the first time in my life in the Army, I was really challenged. It was a smoke fest. It was 3 weeks of road marching, running everywhere. You couldn't, everywhere you went, you had to be reading the Ranger handbook. And somehow, some way, we got to the 3rd week and we had to lead patrols. And the only thing I knew how to do was carry a lot of weight, not complain, and stay awake. And I passed my patrol, and he qualified me to go to Ranger School.
And you were a PFC from the regular Army going to Ranger School?
Yep.
Yeah, that's unheard of now. That's crazy. Okay.
So the colonel was an old Vietnam guy, right? He's like, son, you're going to go. And he's like really old, like you're going to you guys. And I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I show up at Fort Benning, a Ranger class 1189. And they had to promote me to Spec 4 to like send me. I was in Spec 4 for like 12 days when I got to Ranger School. But I got there and I'm a leg. I'm not airborne. And they put me in a squad. The best thing that happened was it was all West Point cadets in the summer, like 85% of the class at ROTC cadets. There was very few enlisted guys in this class, but my squad was made up of 4 bat boys, myself, this E7 that didn't make it past Darby that was from the regular Army, and I forget the other 2 kids who end up not making it. But somehow, some way, Paul Mercer became my Ranger buddy in Ranger School.
Paul Mercer. Okay.
In B375. You know, he was from there. He was a PFC in Ranger School from the regiment. And like I said, the only thing I knew how to do was carry ruck, stay awake, and I never complained. I wasn't a child thief. I was funny. You know, I like telling jokes.
You did.
And me and Mercer, I tell people, and even in my book, that Paul Mercer carried me through Ranger School because I got a no-go in Darby, and I didn't know nothing about peer evaluations, right? So I got a no-go in Darby, which should have been a recycle, but somehow I peered the highest in the squad. And here I am. They send me to mountains. I go to mountains and I fail another patrol. I only got 1 patrol. I'm 0-2 in the mountains, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going through. And the captain who interviews me is like, you know, you're Spec 4 from the 7th ID. He goes, you're so close to grasping it. We made a decision. We're sending you on to Florida. So I'm 0-2 going to Florida. The only thing I got going for me is my peer evaluations. And we get to Florida, and somehow I passed 2 patrols in Florida, squad leader and platoon sergeant patrol. And then I'm on my way to Dugway, Utah, which was in the summer. It was cool because you had to have 4 hours of sleep. We had to dig these hide sites. You know, to dig a desert hide site, and we got to sleep 4 hours, and we got to eat 2 MREs because we were doing live fires.
Where'd you do desert?
At Dugway, Utah. Dugway Proving Grounds.
For some reason, I thought it was Fort Bliss for some weird reason. I don't know.
It changed to Fort Bliss in 1990.
Okay.
In 1989, Paul Mercer and I went to Dugway, Utah.
Okay.
And so what happened is I ended up graduating. And somehow me and Paul had to talk, and I'm like, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, but wasn't eligible for re-enlistment. I said, but if I ever get a chance, I'm going to Ranger Battalion. I know what I want to do. But then we deployed to Panama on December 2nd of 89 with the 7th Division. I'm doing what's supposed to be a 90-day rotation turned into the ground invasion. I was up north, Task Force Bayonet. We were arresting a bunch of thugs that Noriega let out of prisons, you know, murderers, rapists. He just released all of them from prisons, you know, to stop the Americans.
Yes, sir.
And so I'm in 7th ID, but while I'm down there, I became eligible to re-enlist, and I re-enlisted for Ranger Regiment Unassigned. And I reported to Airborne School in January 19th of 1990. I went to Rope in February 1990. My 2 guys I owe everything to were Sean Watson and Tony Lewis, old Rangers. You know, Sean Watson ended up coming to Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, after me and became first platoon sergeant in Somalia, and he was awarded a Silver Star, rightfully so. So Sean Watson ended up spending the next 5 years in my life, you know. But here's what happened. So I go to Rope, and I pass Rope, and I'm thinking, oh, here I am, 75th Ranger Regiment Unassigned. I have no idea where I'm going, and they say, you're going to 3rd Battalion. And I didn't tell you this, I'm 11 Charlie. I won 11 Bravo.
Yeah. I remember. I know. Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So I was mortars, and I get to headquarters company over there at the PAC office, and they're like, oh, you're going to Bravo Company. I'm like, no way. That's Paul Mercer's company. There's no way. So I show up over in Bravo Company, and Mercer's like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing to parade? What are you doing to scroll?
Are legitimately together like the whole time.
Well, you ready for this? So my first night in Bravo Company, they decided to take me to a strip joint we're not even supposed to go to. It's like illegal. It was downtown Columbus before there was everything today. So I end up in this strip joint, and they start feeding me shots of tequila my first night. And I'm supposed to see the first sergeant in the morning, and I can't wake up. They can't get me up. And I'm late for formation on my first day as E5 now in Ranger Battalion. So I report to First Sergeant Chin, and he hated my 7th ID combat badge.
Oof.
And I swear to God, this is like huge legend story. So he told me as an E5 that everybody that had a scroll and a mustard stain jump could smoke me, right? Until they were all gone. So I'm doing push-ups for PFCs with jump stars. I swear to God, This was my introduction. But then I had to have, NCO room, right? So the best thing that ever happened in my life is they put me in a room with Staff Sergeant. Well, at the time, E5 promotable Dan Bush. And Dan Bush.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
You were getting smoked by these privates and stuff because they had jumped in and stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is because when I got smoked, I wanted to be in special ops my whole life as a kid. So I loved getting smoked up. As long as I didn't do anything wrong and I didn't screw up, I wanted to earn that rite of passage. How were you feeling about it? Were you kind of like this?
So check it out. Iron sharpens iron, right? So at the time, I was one of those. I passed rope and everything, but I wasn't able to do max the PT test. Swear to God, I was doing like 70. I came from a leg in.
Yeah.
So a PT standard where everybody should get 300 was the first time I experienced that. The best thing it did for me is I was getting 300 on a PT score.
No, exactly.
So, and it opened the door. The other thing I learned about is the Spec 4 Mafia, right? It serves an amazing purpose, man. It keeps the barracks in check. They police each other. I mean, it gets wild sometimes. I wouldn't advise it on everybody, you know what I mean? But back then it was wild. It was smoke sessions, repelling out windows. I mean, it was nuts.
They were the scariest ones.
I had 2 E5s ahead of me for promotion, to E6. Ranger Regiment likes to promote people, right? So I'm coming up on 4 years in the Army. They want to send me to the E6 board. And my section sergeant, my other buddy Brian Lawrence are both ahead of me. They're E5Ps, and there could only be 2 E6s in the mortar section at that time. So I was going to have to leave Bravo Company.
Okay.
And another great friend and mentor, old scroll, Carlton Dietrich, he jumped into Grenada and jumped into Panama with 3rd Battalion.
Oh.
He said, Sergeant Burns, he goes, you should just put in 4187, reclassified 11 Bravo, and go to one of the line platoons. So I put him in 4187, and I reclassified, and I moved down the hallway to 3rd Platoon. Nice. And I became a team leader. And Aaron Weaver was one of my first privates, and Aaron Weaver would serve with me in Somalia as an E6 in 3rd Platoon on October 3rd. And Dave Easterbrooks went on to do 25 years in the military. I think he had 18 in the regiment by the time he was done. And he jumped into Haditha Dam. Dave Easterbrooks did.
Okay.
And he served in Somalia with us, and he was one of my first fire teams. We go to Texas in July for a regimental. Back then, we were starting to do a lot more with the unit, with the SF groups. Like, we would all show up in a training area, and this time the whole regiment came. We were going to do a mass TAC regimental jump in Texas, and we were going to test some jumping bulldozers out of C-130s for airfields, because they had the last 2 times the enemy dumped freaking big things of sand on the side runways, and they wanted to be able to move them fast. We're like, we'll just jump our own bulldozer. So, of course, I got tasked with being the guy to jump master the first ever bulldozer drop out of a C-130 in Texas from 5,000 feet with 6 dudes. We're chasing it out, and it was the stupidest thing the regiment ever thought of doing. If I knew then what I knew now about science, I would have deferred and probably acted like my ankle was sprained for that one too. But no, I'm just kidding. So let me tell you about this. This is insane. So we spend like 2 days learning to drive a bulldozer, right? And then they load us on a C-130, and this pallet, they load this freaking giant bulldozer up on this pallet with a drone chute. And they give us the 10-second warning. It's not like regular jump mass. And all I'm doing is leading the stick out, right? So I give the commands, and then we're standing there, and all of a sudden this drone chute deploys out of the back, right? Well, when this freaking bulldozer clears the tailgate, the plane pitches vertical, and we all fall out. We go flying out all at once. Oh, it was dangerous, man. And we landed about 2 miles in the middle of the desert from the bulldozer. So JB, being who he is, I land, I pack up my shit, I forget the marking way you marked your kit back then. And we're kind of Hollywood. All we got's our LBE, our weapons, and the keys to the bulldozer, right? And So I'm supposed to start that bulldozer, while the boys are cutting the straps. We're just practicing, right? We get to that bulldozer, and it's 4 feet in sand, nose down, the ass sticking straight up in the air, wheels. Yeah. So, and they're like, well, it didn't work. We'll try it again tomorrow. I'm like, okay, Regiment. Yeah. Way to go, J-Sock. Right. So we go back that day. We go back. It was like an hour bus ride or whatever from wherever we were on Fort Bliss. And we get back, and there's like, hey, B Company, you got alerted. We're like, alerted? What are you talking about? Like, yeah, you're going to Bragg to do some train up.
Okay.
So it's August of 93, and we fly to Bragg. We have no idea. And we get there, and we stay at the unit. We stay in their squadron bay. And the next morning, we started a 3-week training cycle for the mission to Mogadishu, where we did vehicle interdiction. We did, the train up. We did, we did at the time, all of Bravo Company was fast roping. We were going to do the strong point blocking positions, and Alpha Company was going to be a platoon from Alpha Company was with us. They were going to be the Humvee, drivers.
Okay.
But so they trained with us. And then what happens is after 3 weeks, Clinton didn't sign the deployment order. So now we got to go back to Texas to finish the regimental thing, right? The regiment's down there getting it, been training for 3 weeks. And come to find out, it was a contingency mission for Haiti. They were practicing, what the unit was going to do, what the companies were going to do. The jump was the airfield. So it was kind of a contingency mission for us to invade Haiti. And so they send us back to Texas, and we get back, and they're like, and we're like kind of deflated, but we're smoked. We're tired. We've been getting it. We get back to the American conditioned tents, and I run into Sergeant Dietrich, who's now in second, and he's the first sergeant, but he was my buddy. And of course, he's like, hey, he goes, hey man, he goes, I've been in this business. What were y'all doing? I said, man. He goes, and you tell I always tell people, a ranger will help you move, right? But a ranger buddy will help you move a body, right? Sergeant Dietrich would help me move a body. And so Sergeant Dietrich and me and him sat down. I'm like, it's a real world for Mogadishu, Somalia. And he looks at me. He goes, I'm glad I met you. He goes, JB, he goes, you're a good leader. And he goes, just take care of your men. And I'm like, well, right now it ain't a go, right? Well, by the time I got back to my tent, we had been on the ground 6 hours. They alerted Bravo Company again and said we were heading back to Bragg. And I believe it was HHC Task Force 160th that was there, also loaded the C-5 with us to fly back to Fort Bragg. Okay. And this time when we got back to Fort Bragg, we up-armored the Humvees as they did. Not when I say up-armored, not like they do today. It was just bullet doors and bulletproof windows. So we had to do that. We get back. We spent a couple of days prepping for the deployment. And I remember the first time I heard the word Somalia, I like cracked up. I looked at my Ranger buddies and I'm like, is that a type of orange? And I'm like, where the hell is Somalia? I don't know where it's at. I'm like, is that a Florida orange? I don't know. And they're all laughing. They're like, no, we don't know. Then General Downey's up there and he gives a deployment brief. But he said something that never happened to me before, and it never happened to me again. But he's like, he goes into how Bill Clinton canceled the AC-130s because it looked too offensive. He thought we could handle ourselves with our, anyway. So that's what you get when you get Les Aspin and Bill Clinton making decisions. Neither of them's been close to a war zone, but so we and General Downey's like, I know you guys might as well get it out right now. How many of y'all don't want to go? We don't have AC-130s, and nobody in that chow hall, none of the Rangers, nobody raised their hand. You know what I mean? Of course. So we end up leaving Green Ramp in Fort Bragg, and we end up flying. And it was the first time in my life a medic from the unit hands me a little blue pill. He goes, "Oh, this will help you sleep." I didn't know it was Halcyon. I woke up in Mogadishu. So okay, I don't remember refueling in Germany. So here we are, Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, C Squadron. We had 4 SEALs. We had 4 SEALs assigned to us from Gold, and of course Air Force PJs, CCTs. We had, I want to say we had a JTAC, but he was basically in the talk because all the naval gunfire stuff was offshore, and they really weren't allowed to keep a signature. We couldn't. they didn't want. We weren't gonna use them for our mission. I mean, it wasn't gonna happen unless we really got in trouble. One of those, one of those moments. And when we weren't filling sandbags because we were getting mortared every night. They were dropping mortars on us at night. But on this, we started training. Like I started going over to the 10th Mountain and was teaching them like abattis charges, how to blow concrete, because they had concrete telephone poles. Imagine that. Poorest country on earth, the Italians put concrete reinforced telephone poles in there when they colonized it in World War II. I'm like, overkill. But anyway, so we were doing a lot of training, and our platoon, 3rd Platoon, was now on the Jeeps. We were on the Humvees. And so we were providing the strong point blocking positions around all the objectives. And they locate a target. We'd look at the building and 4 points. You two Humvees are going there, you two there, you two there, you two there. And then the platoon, 1st Platoon, 2nd Platoon would fast rope inside our security perimeter. And of course, Delta was going right on top of the target, C Squadron guys. And so on the second day in country, because of the mortars that hit us the first night, they decided to do a foot patrol. So they sent 2nd Platoon out with our company commander, and we had a medic that had come to regiment named Stanley Goff, who had been an operator, and he was an 18 Delta. And he's assigned to B Company. And a Somali runs out of the building with an AK, and Stanley Goff shoots him, right? And the company commander or shoots at him or shoots above him. I can't remember to this day. I don't want to misquote. But I love Stan Goff. He was teaching us so much. He needed to be there, and Captain Steele sent him home.
Wow.
I swear to you, man, the company commander, I'm not afraid to say it. That's what happened. So he gets sent home. And I was like, man, I got to think about it. I'm like, are we really sending people we need here if we get in a fight home? But anyway, it happened. But then the next night, so they come back and they don't find any mortars. So the next night, they're like, we're going to do a smaller patrol. And they called on me. And I took a line squad and 2 machine guns and a medic from the unit.
You took saws or?
Yeah, the line squad. The fire teams had an AR-15 rifleman, a M203 grenadier, a saw gunner, and the team leader carried whatever he wanted. I think over there the team leaders might have had M203s. You know what I'm saying? I think they did it by choice. And so I had a line squad with me, 9 guys, no squad leader, just me. I had 2 fire teams and I had 2 machine guns. Good thing was it was my old squad, 2nd Squad, that was, I chose, of course. You know how that goes, right? Yeah. To go walking out into the city at night, first time, road by road. They gave me an op order, and I briefed my men, and we took off. And we weren't into it 15 minutes when a gunfight broke out like 25 feet in front of us between the Somalis. And they shoot up a car, and this car comes flying at us. And, of course, I jump out, and they slam on the brakes. And a dude rolls out of it. He's all shot up. And I'm like, so I call for the medic, and we actually help these Somalis, and we get a, I forget where the ambulance, it was not an ambulance like you see it was a military vehicle came out and got him with the Red Cross on it. So we kind of saved that Somali dude's life, who was just in a shootout over, like, I think having sex with the guy's sister or something. It was not like they were trying to shoot. I swear to God, that's what the interpreter figured. It's like, that's how it goes in Somalia, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we continued our patrol, and what happens is they fire a mortar, and I heard where it came from.
Okay.
And what happens is, I'm like, you 3 come with me, and I grab 3 dudes to run over to this building, right? And there's a door, and I'm like, we're going in this building. They ran in here, right? And I'm like, I'm going first. You 3 go behind me. You know how to do CQB, but we're going in this room, right? Tack lights. If it's dark, it was just about dusk. There was just enough light, but the Somalis closed their shutters, right? So on these concrete 2-story buildings, and it was my first experience, my 3rd day in country, and I kicked this. I don't know if I kicked it or somehow I got the door. We got it open, and I'm presented with a set of stairs, and I hear people like whispering up the stairs. So all I do is go charging up the stairs and hit my tack light. And my third night in country, there's about 20 Somali dudes all on prayer rugs in a circle in this dark ass room, and I got 2 privates and a Spec 4 with me. That was my first combat experience. That night, they ended up making me overwatch this intersection all night. We set up in a courtyard, and we kind of just overwatched this house where we thought the mortars were coming from to see if they come back, because somewhere right there. They were right in there where they were thumping from. But I never did find them, and in the morning, they just recalled us, and we walked about, I don't know, a click and a half, 2 clicks, back to the base, come in through the front gate, debriefed. And then we started, 3rd Platoon drew a mission where we had to start escorting resupply from the base across town to our base, anything we needed. So every day, besides being on call for the combat mission, if we caught a guy, we had to launch. We had to escort these convoys, so we started driving more and more through the city. And the good thing it did for me is I had done it. I was in Humvees in Panama. In my mind, I felt like God prepared me for that, being in 3rd Platoon, because one thing I realized, if we ever got in a pickle, there's no way to turn a Humvee around in a tight alley without getting everybody killed. So there's only one way to go, and that's forward. And I knew that. And that played a large role on October 3rd with why we ended up not being able to get straight to the crash site, where we ended up being directed by a helicopter from above telling us to make this left, right. And they're trying to direct 2 moving convoys at this point. So we're doing these daily convoy missions, and then in between we would get real missions, go, insert Delta, do, not like one we did at night was called the Radio Mogadishu mission, where the Somali National Alliance, which is the guys we were fighting, were broadcasting from an AM radio at night, like propaganda. They could get away with it.
Yeah.
So we decided we're going to send up the recce birds to find it, with the listening equipment we got. And we're going to send 2 Humvees in. And I was chosen with my Humvee, and Aaron Weaver was chosen to lead this team. And first time ever, I went in and did a vehicle mission to a point target in the middle of the night with the unit, only about 8 of them. And we went to this place identified by the recce bird, and we drove straight to it. And they kicked the door in, and sure enough, there was the AM radio station and the guy doing it. And it was uneventful. We got them all loaded up. We're getting out of there. You got them flex cup, hit sandbag. And on our exfil, we got engaged for the first time. Like about, I want to say 9 Somalis came running down the road. Like I could see them kind of sneaking, but then all of a sudden they just panicked. And it was the first time I ever opened up with the machine guns. And that was the first time we killed people, was that night. And the next time would be the reviewing stand, when we got a tip that there was another big meeting at this target we had called the African Village, and 3rd Platoon was going to set up a blocking position around this reviewing stand where the leader, Eddie, did his propaganda speeches, where they'd all come out and he'd talk and they'd get fired up, and then they'd shoot each other up and they'd fight each other. But now we're in control and they're not moving. And on that night, it's pitch black dark. It's got to be midnight. And same thing, the unit fast ropes or lands on the roof of this giant building. It had to be 6 stories. For Somalia, it was big. It was like an apartment complex, but there's 10,000 people living in it, and they're looking for like 3 dudes. So it became them running, I think, up and down all the stairs and saying, "They ain't here, let's go," or whatever happened. But what did happen is that night, they call them squirters, where they come out of the ejector.
Yeah.
And here comes 19 militiamen running out from behind the reviewing stand. And about that time, an explosion goes off where a couple of our guys were clearing the only room. They wanted to make sure no one was in there in this reviewing stand. So they sent a fire team. ironically, it was my second squad that I had as a line squad leader. Fire team went and cleared this building. I say that because Steven Anderson gets blown up, and when that happens, these 19 Somalis come running out. Once again, right in front of the machine gun position, and I fired 3 tracers, and Dave Ritchie opened up with the machine gun, and we killed 19 militiamen that night. That was the second time I knew we engaged.
Did your boy come out of it okay?
So so Steven Anderson was the biggest dude in the company, right? So he had to be the first one blown up, and we were wearing them big, heavy black vests, which were terrible. They weighed like 28 pounds, just the vest, and LBE, basic load. I had 2 radios. I mean, it was nuts, man. I'm like, but I ended up with Aaron Weaver running up there and grabbing Steven Anderson and pulling him down these stairs, and got him over to the vehicle, and we exfilled. They told us return to airfield. We exfilled. We got him back, and man, he fought on October 3rd. Let me tell you a story about him. What a good kid, just a great kid. He was like 6'4", and he was a big guy. He was like 225, 230, but I mean, he was Ranger shape, but he had asthma. And my squad was notorious for everybody doing like 11-minute 2 miles, including me. Like, we were runners, right? And when we would we would smoke each other in the mornings and run. And this poor kid would never quit. He'd be having asthma attacks, taking freaking, norepinephrine on our runs in the morning. I'm like, dude. And so in Somalia, I was never more proud of him. And then at our 30th anniversary party we had in Knoxville, man, he broke down on me talking about, you saved my life. I said, no, I did not do what you would have done for me, man. Someone had to get out of there. It wasn't that. And it was air business. And anyway, but when we got to Somalia, the Italians had a large sector of the city from the UN. They were in charge of it. Well, we got intel as soon as we get there that they're corroborating. They're hiding Mohammed Faradid. They're hiding his militia. Like, the Italian way was, let's hide them so they don't shoot at us.
Yeah.
Right? Let's not tell anybody. Let's pretend we're here. Let's pretend like we're part of this because our country gets a lot of money, but let's not do anything proactive to get rid of the problem. So I drew this mission of taking this, I don't know who he was, civilian guy, briefcase, over to the Italian compound, 2 Humvees, literally 4 blocks from where we would end up fighting on October 3rd. I drove right into the heart of the hornet's nest, me and Aaron Weaver, to take this, whoever he was, I don't know, intel guy over there, and basically tell the Italians it would be best if they just left. Just let us do our shit, y'all get out of the way.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we pull up to this compound, and they wouldn't let us in the gate. So I'm like, I'm not sitting in this road to get ambushed right here. We're in the worst part of town. So I'm like, pull up past, and we pull up past it, and I'm like, we'll drive in a big circle and come back. Y'all have this damn gate open. The CIA dude goes to get out. When he goes to get out, all these freaking Somalis come running out with their AKs. And JB jumps out, and I stick my MC, and all my guys get out with their guns. Next thing you know, it's like a Mexican showdown, or I'm sorry, Dreamer showdown. Get that right.
Dreamer showdown.
It's a Dreamer showdown, and the interpreter is like, and he starts screaming, and they all lower their weapons, and I'm like, hey man, this ain't cool. I'm not wired for this. You know what I mean? And then the CIA guy comes around his corner. He's like, come on, y'all, the gate's open. So we go in there and the gate's open, and we pull inside the gate. Now the Italians want us to lock their weapons. They're not comfortable with us being inside. I'm looking around and I'm seeing all these Somali dudes with AKs just walking around in the Italian compound. Now I'm in there with them. The gate's closed, and my job is to keep Rangers alive, not Somalis alive, right? So it was no fine line for me. My job is to keep Rangers up.
Yep.
But amazingly, in through the gate drives a UN Land Rover that were given to all these Somali tribes, right? And out steps this very tall black guy with a bald head that looks exactly like a deed. So I call back and I'm like, I think a D just pulled right in this gate. And about that time, the Italians start screaming, and this dude jumps back into the Land Rover. They back out, close the gates, and I'm talking to the recce bird now, giving them, direct. I'm saying this thing just left the gate of the compound we're in. They know where we're at, so they had to reposition, and they followed this Land Rover to a different part of the city, and we launched. They launched the task force, all the first and second platoon fast rope. I ended up linking up with them. They gave me a Greek coordinate. I plotted a route, and we ended up linking up with them over there. And we get there, and they end up arresting the police chief of another district. They went in on his house to where that vehicle went. Problem was, when they bring him out, I'm like, that's not the dude we saw. Okay. So it was like a communication gap, like between us and the recce bird. And the recce bird, started following the wrong. There was 500 of them in the city, wrong white. And that's where they came up with the idea, if we used informants, we'd have to mark their vehicles. So if you see in the movie, marked it. Yeah. We figured out a way to sneak markings on the vehicles, even us. We're going to figure out a way to mark them so we know we're tracking the right vehicle. So we kind of launched on that, and that was the first time we ever used Blackhawks to do crowd dispersion. The crowds were forming all around us, like we were their only TV doing a daylight mission, right? Daylight, and this helicopter swooped in right in front of my blocking position where all this crowd was. And the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, besides firefight, was this woman had her baby, like they do, wrapped up in their full length, and the baby comes shooting out from the rotor wash and like flies 60 feet through the air through a window that's closed. And the woman's like freaking out, laying on the ground, like just crying, "Oh, you killed my baby." So one of my guys, Chris Schleif, barrels the door down and picks up the baby. And somehow the baby's fine. It's just crying. And he brings it back to the woman, and she thanked us. But I'm like, was that crazy? Did I really just see that? But I mean, literally, like the rotor, when it came in, you imagine the helicopter comes above the crowd, like 10 feet above it. And then when it went to pull off, it shot the baby, with the thrust. It was insane. So, but then we get back to the airfield. We kind of do a hot wash. We come up with things we got to do better. What happened? That wasn't the dude I saw. I think to this day, me and Dave thought it was right. Got. Why else do you run? You know what I mean? You don't take off, shut the gate, get everybody upset. That was pretty much our daily schedule. We ended up doing. So what ends up happening is we end up getting tail on Osmanado one time garage, and we hit this garage, and he put it there, and the next day they picked up his convoy. Little birds did a VI, what they call it, VI vehicle
interdiction,
VI, and they do the VI and they catch Osmanado, so he was the financier, and from that forward started whittling down the guys on the list we wanted to capture. But 3rd Platoon was still doing convoy security every day. Like we're every day we had to, 4 of our vehicles had to go escort a convoy. It took half the day. It took 8 hours, and we would pay a price on October 3rd because we only had half of our fighting go in on the insertion. The other half was escorting the convoy.
Oh, so really?
That was one of the biggest. We were tired. We came off a mission on October 2nd that lasted about 18 hours of running around in your kit, right? It was hot, and so it was basically, we're going to take the weekend off. So Saturday we kind of laid around, but Sunday morning, all my guys were like, "Hey, JB, Brad Thomas, who went on to serve 14 years in the unit, bunch of guys that I'd grown up in 3rd Platoon were like, hey, SR Gallagher, if we can go to the beach." So I go to my platoon sergeant. I'm like, "Hey, can I take some of the guys to the beach?" And they're like, "Let me get permission." And he got his permission. They said, "You can go, but you can't swim." I'm like, "Why would I go to the beach? You can't swim." They said, "Because there's like sharks eating people up and down the coast." I'm like, "Okay." So I tell them all, I'm like, "Look, man, the uniform is black PT, PT shirt. Every other man's got to have his AR, and we're taking the heavy machine guns." So we loaded up 50 cows, and we took a couple the M2, the M249s.
Nice.
And, I took about.
Will you explain for those who aren't in the military or watching this what an M249 is?
It's at the time it was a Mag 58 was a Belgian machine gun that we had fielded that year. We transitioned from M60s, the old pig we used to call it, to the M40. To the M249 G model. I think it was at that time the Golf. We fielded the Alpha, but then we made some changes to it, put some nice videos on it, and I think it was the Golf we were using by that time. We take off to the beach, man. Me and all the privates and Spec 4s, couple team leaders, and Aaron Weaver was the other E6, and we go to the beach, and we're literally, we weren't allowed to drive in between the helicopters, so we had to go all the way around this long-ass old Russian runway. And then we're sitting there, and I'm like, hey, man, Sergeant Gallagher said no one can go swimming, but I'm going to look that way so I can watch the airfield in case something happens. And you guys, make your best judgment. I can only hope Rangers don't take good as Romanian nurses, right? I'm thinking if you guys stink and sweaty, shark ain't gonna eat you, right? So it wasn't 2 minutes, they were all in the water. Everybody was in the water, and I'm sitting there with my driver at this point, and he says, "Holy shit!" PFC Cat Val says to me, he goes, "Holy shit!" They said Irene.
What?
I'm like, shut up. So Irene was the code word for a target locator.
Yeah.
And then
So you guys weren't officially a part of the operation. So when they called Irene, you just were kind of alerted that, hey, the shit's going down.
Yep. They had the informant was making his mind up where the meeting was happening. He was driving a cab, and he finally figured it out. And once he parked in front of the building, they gave us the Lucy. Lucy was, we're going. So now I got to get everybody out of the water.
Okay.
And once Irene it wasn't usually 8 to 10 minutes, we're gone. We're out the gate. So I'm thinking, man, I can't drive all the way the hell around this airfield. I'm going straight across. They're already firing up the birds. Ain't nobody going to say nothing.
Yeah.
So I drive straight through the center airfield with all my guys, half of them wet. And as soon as I come through the gate, they're like, JB, get your fucking kit on. We're moving. I'm like, Roger that, Sergeant. So I'm like, everybody get your shit, Ranger stuff, everybody get, and I threw on my BDUs. I grabbed my LBE. I grabbed my extra. I carried 3 magazines with trace, just out of force habit, being weapon squad leader. I like to mark targets myself, and then shooted the tracers, right?
Yeah. As an FOJ tech, I always carried at least 1 mag full of tracers to mark targets.
Yeah. So I grabbed them 3, and I had my basic load. I grabbed my LBE. I checked both my radio. And I head out to my vehicle, and they tell me I'm going to be last in the order of movement. Aaron Weaver's going to be in front of me, and they showed us the route. Kind of said, I drove over there before. There's a tricky turn to the right here. If we if we turn too soon, we'll end up in a bad dead end because I did it. But I said, we got to hit this turn right after the release and to make it straight to the target building. And sure enough, we ended up racing out. Birds took off, and we're supposed to get there just as they're roping, and we ended up at wrong. Me and Weaver didn't. We stayed out because I knew it. Not blaming anybody, but we just made a mistake, and they turned down that road. Everybody turned back around the 5 tons that we were going to take the prisoners out on.
Okay.
We had it was probably 4 to 6 minutes. However, during that time, 2nd Platoon was fast roping on the objective. We were only a click from it on the road. We could make it there really fast. So when
they were doing 90 footers, right?
So that day, the Olympic Hotel was 60 feet tall.
Okay.
So they had to get above it.
Okay.
Oh, and I don't know safety. I didn't see the fast rope, so and I've only speculated, and everyone speculated. What I can say is he fell at least 70 feet.
I did a 67 when I was supporting the SAS as a JTAC, and that was probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Out of all the gunfights, roping 67 feet was the scariest thing I've ever done.
You're vulnerable. That's the most vulnerable on that damn rope.
Yep.
So we turned. At the time, it's Jeff Struker's up front. Danny Mitchell was in the second vehicle, and then it was Colonel McKnight. We stuffed him in there behind the first two vehicles, not knowing what was coming.
Okay.
And then Bob Gallagher and Dave Wilson, and then a 5-ton, which was going to load the prisoners. We wanted it up the road, so the 5-ton was going to go straight to the target building for the unit guys to start loading the prisoners. So when we turned down this road, and then me and Weaver, I'm in the last vehicle, and when we turned down the road, it was a hornet's nest, man. It was surreal. The fighters were running on both sides of the road towards the target building that I'm now driving towards to set up a blocking position, and in about 20 seconds, they're all going to be behind me, running straight at me. What I'm thinking, and what ends up happening is, when the 5-ton truck turns onto the target building road, it immediately gets disabled with 2 RPGs. They ambushed right on the road. We ended up scrapping a 5-ton right there, so we only had one to load all the prisoners, and if we had any casualties, we were going to load them on that. And then we had 2 SEALs. No, I'm sorry. The SEALs were driving a flatbed cargo RV in case we had any stretchers. So they're in our convoy too, and they're in front of me. They're in front of Dave Wilson's vehicle, which was in front of me, another Ranger squad leader in my platoon. So him and Sergeant Gallagher were a 2 Jeep team, and then me and Aaron, Kruker and Mitchell, and then the Colonel was just in there. I guess we'll talk about that another day. But my immediate problem was I was surrounded, and it was no longer a strong point blocking position. It was now a near ambush. Clay Optic opens up with the 50 cal. I don't know how many we killed right away. And Dave Ritchie had the M240G that he opened up with. And so what happens to me is when I go to get out of my vehicle, I clip my foot on the little ledge in the Humvee, and it throws me on my face. I mean, I literally didn't even catch myself, like on my face. That's my introduction to the fight on October 3rd. But I get up, and as I'm getting up, I roll over, and of course, Ranger thing, I go to a knee, like up against the Humvee. I look up, and 10 feet to my front are 2 AK-47s and an RPG. And the RPG gunner has run straight down the center road, and he's getting ready to fire from 10 feet into my or at the gunner, and all I did was level my AR, and I shot him 3 times in the stomach, the chest, and the face, and he crumpled, and the 2 guys with AKs went to run away, and I made a decision. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, that I was going to run up, and now I'm going to kick this AK-40, the RPG out of the road, right? Buddy, when I stood up, all I heard was, and it was coming from both directions, and bullets are just making that noise, and I'm like, so now I'm like, we got to push up. And now
can I stop you 1 second? Because I just want to. So the vehicles that you were carrying at that time, they were like level 3 armor, level 4 armor. They were just the regular, at that time, soft skin vehicles.
Humvees, yep.
Yeah, so bullets went through it like butter.
Except the windows and except the doors. The doors had level 3 protection. The windows, front windows, had level 3 protection. The cupola was open. We had no gun turrets. There was just a 50 cal on top of the old school. And the back, it made no sense to keep them damn hatches on. We took all the hatches off so we could, keep ammo. So we stuck guys on 50 cal ammo cans to look out the back. That's how we inserted. And then if guys needed to exfil, we always, they could just jump in the back and we can get moving. We end up turning, and I make it like 12 feet up the road. So I'm still like the tail end of my vehicle's right at the turn to the intersection. And now I'm looking up, and they're firing at us from the buildings, the windows of the buildings. So now we're shooting everything. It's 360 degrees. And I go run up to Dave Wilson in front of me. I'm like, Dave, we got to push up. We got to get that other 5. We had another 5-ton. We're trying to get up the road to get to the prisoners, so they're calling for the evac of the prisoners. So we're go. But at the same time, the helicopters were loose. Not just the Little Birds, but now the Blackhawks were called in to start giving us some air cover because it was getting bad. And at the time, Strucker was dispatched with Danny Mitchell to go back to the airfield with Blackburn because he was
Okay.
he
So,
he
so,
was
they
not.
were, so they were already dealing with shit on the way back. Okay.
So as soon as they turned off the target building, they made a right turn and they rode 25 feet, and 20 Somalis jumped out in front of them. Dominic Pila was in the cupola, like in the back where that hatch is, but I was told he leaned up and he fired with the M240G, and a bullet hit him straight between the eyes and killed him. So Pila was killed. He was one of my gunners on Strucker's vehicle. And of course, he fell into the back, and his brains were all over the back. And the guys in the back were like, I've talked to them.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing this on the radio. I'm in a melee now. I'm in a melee around the corner, and my job is to make sure the prisoners get on the 5-ton, the exchange. I'm having to move ammo in between vehicles.
And can I ask you this? This is a lot of this is for obviously for me, but a lot of this is for the people watching, because I feel like Rangers are instilled with some kind of, there's something that we go through in our mind. And I know inside there was that you lost a man, but at the same time, you got to carry on with the operation. So were you at that point, were you like in a state of, if you don't mind me asking, were you in a state of panic because you lost one of your guys, or were you focused on, hey, I got to get this done? And then you later on, obviously, you think about it.
So I'm going to say this. I never was in a state of panic on October 3rd, ever. Yes, no, I'm going to get to when I got into a state of panic on October 3rd. But what I'm going to say here now, not being arrogant, I had a job to do.
Yes, sir.
I had been in that platoon longer than everybody but Mark Lumen.
Okay.
Mark Lumen was now the only guy that had jumped into Panama, and he was actually in 2nd Platoon in Panama, got promoted. He was one of our team leaders on Dave Wilson's vehicle. He also became the first Ranger to commit suicide after Somalia. So, yeah. So Mark Lumen was right. I was with him all day fighting. And he was Lorenzo Ruiz's best friend. And I'll get to how Ruiz ends up getting shot and later dying. I'll get to that. But so 15 minutes into the fight, my 50 cal gunner gets shot through both forearms, compound fracture, clay optic. I'm sorry, through his one forearm, and I forget what I forget. It's something else with his other arm, but he was bleeding for both arms. And he we're in a melee. So he runs, the medic puts some dressings on him, and he runs to another vehicle. He runs to the 5-ton that Kowalewski is driving that's going to take the prisoners. And Clay jumps in there with him because he's wounded. And he can't really fire. So Ruiz takes over. Ruiz is a sergeant. He's a team leader, and he's assigned to my vehicle. He was my number 2 in Somalia on my vehicle. And Ruiz gets on the 50 cal now. And at this time, I move about 30 feet up the road to tell Dave Wilson and the 5-ton truck, start, drive, and just move up the road. It's about 100 yards. I'm like, move up there. Just push up. Don't worry about it. Don't listen. Just go. And when I turn around to leave, a hand grenade drops out of a window somehow and explodes. And luckily I was out of the blast zone, but I got a little piece of shrapnel in my left hip. Just it was a nuisance more than anything. But Dave Wilson is blown the hell up. I'm sitting there looking at him in the road. He's bleeding from 40 places in his legs, his arms, and his Mark Lumen's one of them. They pick him up and drag him back to their vehicle, and they get him sitting up in the TC. And then when I get back to my vehicle, Dave Ritchie's been shot in the foot, my gunner, but he's okay. It was like a ricochet, but he's bleeding from the back of his foot. I mean, I'm going to say like right above the ankle. I shouldn't say foot, right above the ankle. But he's still fighting. But the problem is his machine gun, he can't get the feed tray cover open or the charging handle open, and I grab it, and I stick the bipod legs on the ground, and I don't know what I did, just instinctor. I just like beat it against the vehicle, and the feed tray, when it popped open, the buffer and the spring, the feed tray and the bolt was shot in two in his arms. He didn't know it. So the machine gun was disabled, and he grabbed an M16 that was Ruiz's, because Ruiz is now in the turret of the 50 cal. So then they call for, so now what happens is the birds come in, and Super 6-1 is assigned the internal orbit right above us. So they're doing tight turns, and the little, the miniguns are firing constant. They're whacking people, right? And it's nonstop, and it's so loud, and it's, at the most 60 feet above me, but I can see their eyes. And the operators, it's Dan Bush and Jim Smith to this day, I remember, and the crew chief, and they're pointing at me they're pointing at the ground like, look out, it's about to come up your ass. So we jump out, and when I look up, the helicopter is doing this frantic, auto gyration to get the tail boom turned around to engage this target with the snipers. And that's when the RPG hit in the tail right above my blocking position, and it auto rotates. And I tell people to this day, they tell me I'm crazy, but I did the one thing I always knew to do, because I was in mortars. I closed my eyes and I counted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and I heard boom, and I knew the helicopter had crashed. Yeah. But I could just about 400 meters as the crow flies from where I'm at straight. I knew we were at a cardinal direction. And in my mind, I was thinking, I already knew we were going to the crash site. There was no.
It was you used the flash to bang.
Yep. That's what I always did. It was something I did. I learned to do. It was training. You know what I mean? It was what went through my head. But then I got to deal with my next mission, which I'm supposed to be aiding in the transfer of the prisoners from the unit to there. But now it's in a frantic hurry. So when I go to run up there, adjacent to the target building down the alley, at this time, Aaron Weaver had pushed across. I was on this side, which is the decision we made from the airfield. We do better with cover, just putting our vehicles on both sides of the road, because the 5 tons in the alley now adjacent to the building. So we got a Humvee on one side, a Humvee back here. And what happens is I hear the difference between an AK and a PKM. It was a belt-fed machine gun, and I knew it. And I heard blam, 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 just different, right?
Yeah.
The Dishka, but it was a PKM, which was a Russian belt-fed, bag-fed. The one you always see the Taliban guys that look like they're homosexual carrying. They always give that.
Yep. I've had a couple of them guys throw some lead at me before.
Yeah. So I hear it, and I go to run up to the edge of this building to look down the alley to see where it's at, right? And as soon as I turn around, somehow a round ricochets and hits me dead center of the black vest I'm wearing, knocks me back on my ass. And it pisses me off, but I'm kind of out of breath for a second. But I stand up, and the only thing I can figure, I'm we're fucked. Because if that thing keeps shooting, we'll never get the prisoners loaded. They couldn't get them out the door. The 5 tons in the alley, it's getting eaten up by it. The tailgate's getting shot. And so I remembered we had a law rocket in Aaron's vehicle across the alley. So I run across the alley, and I said, give me the law. And Aaron reaches in the back and hands me the law. And I run out. I run back across the alley now. And this thing's now, and it's just, rounds are just pinging off the buildings. And I'm like, well, fuck, what am I going to do now? I can't get a shot, right? I couldn't get a shot. There's no way I could shoot him. So I looked, and I said, man, if I can just time it, I could run out to the end of this vehicle and just expose myself for a second. I need to be in front of the vehicle to shoot. So I extend the law, and I run out there in front of the vehicle, and I swear, this is how I tell people I came to believe that God existed. The very second I lifted the law up to my shoulder, his machine gun jammed, and he stood up to clear the jam. And I leveled the crosshair on the tree he was behind, and I fired, and it annihilated him. And then it was like a little a 1 second reprieve, and then they started coming out of the building with all the prisoners, and we were able to get the prisoners loaded. And immediately the unit guys and Rangers Rangers from another blocking position under a very heroic lieutenant and some good privates made their way to the crash site.
Was that Damaso? Damaso?
Yep, D. Damaso, and also, I want to say he was a corporal at the time, and he went to the unit, and his name is, and if I wouldn't have been talking so long, I'd tell you, but they both received the Silver Star, and they were very well deserved for their actions to get there. And of course, with the unit guys, they ended up establishing the first perimeter around the crash site. But now we get the prisoners, and it's time to go, right? We got to go. And now they decided they're going to direct us to the crash site. Well, while this is going on, we end up, Colonel McKnight's now in the lead. Unfortunately, I'm just going to say that, but he's now in the lead, and we're indecisive. He keeps doing the accordion. He'll drive 100 feet and then slam on the brakes and stop and say, "Where are we at? We need direction." And I'm in the last Humvee, and we're getting fucking hammered. And now I got Rangers from 1st platoon, 2nd platoon that are all going the same direction, but they fast roped in. And the last thing they were told, like we didn't do a real good job disseminating. But I was looking at team leaders, squad leaders, privates, and I would say, look, we're going to the crash site. We're going to that bird. Just pick a Delta guy and follow him. There's no time. And about that time, we made the right-hand turn, but when we did, we had to slam on the brakes, so we would have hit the Humvee in front of us, and we were in a fatal funnel ambush. They ambushed us, and Kabako was killed. Ruiz was hit. I was shot in the shoulder. What's his name? 1st platoon team leader. I can't think of his name because I keep thinking. I can't. Anyway, he comes running up to me, and he's shot in the leg. He's got a bullet on his leg, and I immediately just started putting his pressure dressing on, and I'm like, we're going to the crash site. And about that time, Ruiz had slumped down inside the turret in front of the radio, and a medic from the unit had run over and jumped in the back seat of my Humvee, and our other medic, John Stansfield, who treated Clay Optic, was now working on Ruiz on his knees, in front of him, and we got him sitting up, looking out back, but a bullet went in his shoulder and came out his hip, so it hit every organ on its way through. And I got a bullet still in my shoulder at the same intersection, and Kabako was killed in the church, shot in the head, 10 feet in front of me, and it was total fucking mayhem. And Schleip comes running up to me, and I grab him, and me and him run over behind his car, and I said, put this machine gun down, and you kill every one of them fuckers. And he puts the machine gun down, and he shot about 16 motherfuckers that were running up the road. We killed them all. And then we turned, making our way to the crash site, and we turned down this road where we drove in front of a compound that was on our target list. It was the Sheikh Dendir compound, which is like an Islamic study center, and it's where all militia was. And I'm like, okay, cool. We finally got some momentum. About that time, everybody's stopping in front of us, so we got to slam on our brakes again. And out the gate, I'm 50 feet from these dudes, and out the gate comes about 60. They're moving on us now, right? And I'm like, fuck. So we open up again with the 50 cal, and I have no idea. We shot them, the people in the buildings behind them, the people down the road behind them. It was mayhem because we were in a fatal funnel, man. And about this time, I'm getting frustrated because I'm seeing the smoke of the target, but I'm seeing the smoke of the helicopter at this time, it burns different. The fuel in an aircraft burns a color. So I've been watching it, and they're burning tires, but it's real black, and it ain't color. This is blue black. Yeah. And I can see it over the buildings, and I'm like, we're about to drive past the target. We're about to drive past the crash. Aaron Williamson was that team leader's name. He went on to do 20 years in SF during the whole GWAT, but he was the team leader that was wounded and was led his men to ended up making it to the crash site. But so now we got Humvees on two sides of this 4-way intersection that's really fucking big. They're shooting at us from everywhere. And we drove past the turn for the crash site, and I knew it. So I jumped out of my vehicle, and this is when I made my way to the front of the convoy. I ran all the way to the front to get to my platoon sergeant, Bob Gallagher. I'm like, hey, man. He's like, what are you fucking doing here? I need you back at your Humvee. I said, Ruiz's. The medic's telling me if we don't get him to the hospital, he's dead. And I'm like, and I said, not only that, we passed the crash site. He's like, I know we passed the crash site. He goes, the colonel's over there throwing purple smoke to mark our location. I said, what? And I'm like, anyway, but we're listening to a helicopter that's moving, trying to direct our convoy. And in the meantime, Michael Durant has now been shot down in another part of the city. And the convoy that was the other half of our platoon that was on convoy escort had made it back to the airfield, and now they were launched to go find out if there was anybody at the Durant crash site. Okay. And in the time, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart had inserted onto the crash site to try and see if any of them survived. They found Mike Durant alive. They made a last stand. They were overrun. Everyone was killed. Durant was captured, and our platoon leader made it to the crash site and couldn't find anybody, no bodies, no nothing, with some operators. But we're still in a melee now, and Bob Gallagher tells me to run back to my vehicle, get back to your vehicle, and we're going to the crash site. That's the orders. We got to make it there, John. And I'm like, all right. And I go to start making my way to the crash site. I run past the 5-ton with the prisoners on it. I run past the SEAL vehicle it's got Casey Joyce's body on it. He's dead. A team leader from 2nd Platoon. Got Scott Galentine. He was shot through his hand, and his thumb was completely gone. And Anton Bernson was wounded, a young POC from 2nd Platoon. All 3 guys were in the same squad in 2nd Platoon. And Joyce is on a stretcher with his head towards the back. Galentine's sitting next to him. And now Jason Moores is the RTO, a PFC, incredibly heroic. And Dave Deemer's an incredibly heroic Spec 4 at the time, who was on the hood of our Humvee, the SEAL Humvee. Jeez. And I decided to take up a position to sit on the tailgate until we could get moving. And then when we got somewhere, I could run back to my vehicle, right? So I sit on this tailgate, and they're like, we're moving. So we go to get moving, and we literally move about 10 feet, but we're only about 6 or 8 feet from this wall of buildings. And we park right in front of this metal gate. And literally, I didn't even have time. Jason Moores is climbing over the side, and just as he gets turned around, a hand grenade comes through the gate and lands straight in my lap. And all I did was stood up, and I tried to jump. I tried to jump in the lap of Scotty Galentine and Barrickson, and Joyce's body was there. So I made it like halfway, and when I turned around, somehow, some way, the SEAL had punched the gas, hit the gas, and we pulled up at 8 feet. The hand grenade blew up in the street. Oof. And now I'm hanging off this fucking tailgate of this Humvee with all my equipment on. And I'm sitting there, Jason Moores, and about that time, I was able to get myself kindly situated with my left leg over Joyce's body, over the top of his torso, and I had my weapon now positioned so I could shoot. And we were turning around. We made it out onto National Street. We were able to it was a big 4-lane road, so we were able to just do a big swell, get everybody turned around to get back to the crash site. But now we turn around, and we're coming back right back through the same fatal funnel to go back to the road we missed. We should have turned to get to the crash site. And man, they were out in full force. And the next thing that happened is I remember Jimmy Telsher, the other corporal, raises his weapon, and I raise my weapon, and about 6 dudes run out of this alley, and with guns to their hips to shoot us. And I fired 3 rounds, and then I got hit in my calf. I had an AK-47 fired from 10 feet away, went through my left tibia and my calf. And now I had an open grade 3 compound fracture with my bone sticking through my pant leg. And now what happens is we got to retrace our route because the SEALs, so all 3 of the SEALs on the Humvee are wounded. Only one of them isn't. The driver, Homer Nearpair, somehow, by the grace of God, doesn't get wounded. But Howie Wasden, who me and him became really friends, is really bad. He was really shot up. And the other one, John Gay, was shot up, pretty damn good. And then Dave Deemer's in between them in a cargo Humvee. It didn't have no windshield, but he's laying down with a saw on the hood of that fucking Humvee, and we like kneeling and just whacking people like our biggest. Everybody else, and then Jason Moore's in the back, another PFC, incredibly heroic. And Jimmy Telcher, corporal, who would receive a Silver Star as well. And then, so we're making our way back, and if you can imagine this, we go through another ambush, and somehow the front of the Humvee half explodes, it seems. It fucking, I don't know what hit it, but like half the hood rips off, explodes. All four tires are flat. And we're watching the rest of the convoy leave us because we're about to lose this vehicle. And now we still got a mile to get back. And I'm sitting there with a compound open, grade 3 fracture, a dead guy, Galentine wounded, Berenson wounded, all these young guys on this Humvee, and we go to make this left turn. We go to make this left turn at this thing called the War Memorial, and Dave Deemer yells back. The driver doesn't know which way to go. The SEAL, he's never driven it, and he's like yelling at me, "JB, which way to go?" I'm like, "Go left, because if we went right, we'd be right back into a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we go somehow get around this War Memorial, and the fucking Humvee comes to a dead stop.
The one question I had for you, because I'm watching this, and I'm thinking about the scenarios I've been in. I've been in a whole bunch of gunfights, but I've never been like, holy shit, the whole city's attacking me. I've had a buddy be there, in Ramadi and stuff, but I was never like, look, everybody's getting shot up kind of deal. So I'm asking you, at this point, did you ever feel like, did you feel defeated, or did you feel like I'm doing the Ranger mission and, hey, let's get the job done because we train to fight and we do pretty good job of when we train where we always do the casualties and stuff. Was it just like business as usual, or were you at a point of panic at any point? Yeah.
Never. It was never business as usual. As far as I wouldn't say panic. I'm an animated dude. When I was, anybody that knows John Burns for this time, Rick Murray, anybody that knows me will tell you that I put a lot of passion into leading Rangers, and I love the fact that they looked at me when it got tough. Right, I lived for that. Yep. It wasn't, but it was what I lived for. Right, if you're not gonna live for that, don't be a fucking Ranger squad leader. Sorry, it's just how. If you're not going to live for the times when your guys look to you and say, "What do I do now?"
Yeah,
you're probably not in the right career. You're not in the right career field, right?
Sir.
So now we're going to get to the panic part.
Okay.
So now here I am in this Humvee that I didn't start out on.
Okay.
Everybody's wounded, except for Dave Deemer. And Jason Moore, somehow grace of God. Jason Moore's had 2 rounds in his radio when he got back, but none of them entered his body. They hit the radio. That radio was destroyed. The SING guards he had on his back. Dave Deemer was never shot, amazingly. Telcher was never hit. So all these are the guys that are combat effective still, but there's 3 of them, and the SEAL driver. And now the Humvee's stopped dead. And we're surrounded. A crowd of Somalis forms. And that's the first time where I'm like, this is my Alamo moment. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm about to crawl at the back of this Humvee, get behind a Humvee tire, and it's going to be run out of ammo or get slaughtered. They're going to just overrun us and just kill us. But what happens is, this 5-ton truck that had the prisoners on it comes flying around the same corner at like Talladega, flying, and it doesn't have a driver's side door on it, and I would find out later why. So the driver of that 5-ton was Richard Kowalewski, and it had the prisoners on it.
Ski, right?
Yep, Ski Kowalewski.
Okay.
And And the Somalis in one of the ambushes had fired an RPG from so close.
Yeah.
It went straight through the door, severed his arm, and lodged in his chest. And all they could do was put him in the back with the prisoner. So here's this kid in this 5-ton with an RPG sticking out that's unexploded. So the person driving the 5-ton now was an operator. One of the operators. He took over the driving of it. And now the prisoners. So what happens is this 5-ton truck comes flying around the turn and sees us and starts trying to push us. So, and mind you, I'm sitting on this tailgate, and they're trying to push one side of the truck, and it just wasn't going. We had 4 flat Humvee tires. The hood was gone. It was blown up. Everybody on it's wounded. So what happens, a miracle happens, is the other half of our platoon Humvee was redirected to come out and meet us. They saw us on the Recce Bird that we were in no man's land, and they were dispatched back from the airfield. They'd come back from Crash Site 2, which is Durant's, with nothing. And now they were being redirected to make a trip. They were going to fight their way to Crash Site 1 from the airfield, but they came upon us, and it was my platoon leader. And at the time, an operator reached down, grabbed me by my load-bearing equipment with everything on, and pulls me over the side of the 5-ton and sits me down right up against the rear of the tailgate with my leg kind of under me. I'm fucking screaming at this point because it's not fun. You know what I mean? It's
not
and,
like me or
and but I'm sitting there and I'm looking into the eyes of Timothy Martin. He was an operator that was seated on a 50 caliber ammo can that was hit with an RPG sympathetic detonation. He was missing the lower half of his body. They had mass trousers on him. He had no legs, but he was alive. He was a master sergeant from the unit. He was sitting across from me. Next to him was Kowalewski with the RPG out of him. We originally had 19 prisoners. 6 of them are dead. They bled all over the 5-ton. And I'm sitting in the rear corner, and they tell us just to go. And the 5-ton takes off, and we get back to the airfield. And we pull into the gate of the airfield, and the first person to run up to the tailgate is my number 3, Dave Ritchie, my machine gunner, and Colonel Boykin. And they go to let the tailgate down, and blood just comes pouring out of the fire. And they got me, and I now, you imagine they sat me down, and now it looks like I'm missing half my body because I got so much blood. You know, it was they put me on a stretcher, and it was desert BDUs. Think about them.
Yeah.
And it looked like purple, you know. But anyway, they put me on an old, OG green stretcher, and they carried me over to triage. And it was the first time I was able to let a breath out all day, you know what I mean, And they laid me down next to Ruiz. And he's alive, but he's turning blue.
Oh.
And I reach over and I just held his hand, and he starts telling me about his daughter, and they come get him, and they carry him away, to go to triage. And then they come finally to me, and they like, "Where are you hit?" And they're doing triage. I'm like, I said, I don't even know. I mean, I'm like, my leg. I'm like, and then they start cutting my clothes off. And they're like, he's got a gunshot wound left shoulder. He's got shrapnel on his hip. I had a piece of shrapnel on I want to say my outside of my right foot. I can't remember.
Were you feeling the pain or the burning, or were you just no?
Pain now, the adrenaline, you reach that moment. Like when I say literally take a breath, it was the first time I was able to go.
Yeah.
In 5 hours. I was fighting for 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
Non-stop. So now I take a breath, and they're like, he's level 2, or they scream something, and then they come over and they carry me to a Army UH-1H Iroquois medevac helicopter with Paul Leonard, an operator from the unit, and they fly us to a mobile triage hospital that's run by Swedish women. It's all sweet, blonde-haired Swedish people. They're part of the UN.
Yeah.
But I get there, and they're like, by this time, Dr. Feelgood, they had given me some medicine. So really, I'm like, and they're like, as soon as I get there, they're like, debrief him at surgery. And they cart me off to surgery. And I remember waking up. It felt like it was 3 or 4 in the morning, but we could hear all the shooting, all the gunfighting still going on. They were still fighting all night, 18 hours, man. But I'm awake, and I look over, and there's Paul Leonard, and once again, he reaches out to grab my hand, and this is an operator I'll never forget. He's like, "What a night, man." He goes, "How many people do you think we lost?" I said, I was like, I was just like, I don't know. So what happens is daylight breaks. It's like 7 o'clock, and the medevac helicopter's been running all night, and they come back, and same pilot, but they load me and him back on that Huey, and they fly us back to the, our our own JSOC hospital, which was overrun. They couldn't even, it was, they had to start farming out casualties. They couldn't handle them all. Oh yeah, they farmed them out. We had a very small contingent of I think there was only 2 surgeons, man. I think we only brought 2 surgeons into country. That was one of the lessons learned, from now on.
Yeah.
From now on, that was one of the lessons learned. From now on, we need a lot more.
We need a surgeon from these guys, a surgeon from these guys, a surgeon from these guys. Yeah.
That was one of the bigger lessons learned. The bigger picture lessons.
Yeah.
So they fly us back, and literally, amazingly, my platoon was just pulling into the gate. We're landing, and they offload us, and I'm under anesthesia. I'm in traction, you know what I'm saying? And they roll us they wanted to roll us into our hospital so they can get an accurate count. They actually lost count of where guys were overnight. They had to, the UN took over a lot of our casualties, took us to different places, got us all. Now they're bringing us back, and our unit, of course, wanted to count us. But they roll us into this tent, and there's probably 50 wounded dudes, and it's next to the morgue. And guys reading off the names of the dead like it's like you're sitting in class, and they're taking roll. And I'm just like, that's the first time I lost it, man. I started the realization. I heard Dan Bush's name, that he was dead. I heard, Casey Joyce. I knew he was dead, but I didn't know Ruiz was dead. And when they read Ruiz's name, it really hit home. I knew people were dead, but all 5 of the 6 Ranger casualties that were killed took place on the convoy. Gunners, they were all in the heavy weapons that were ended up, killed. And then Jamie Smith was shot on the way to Crash Site 1, and they tried to work on him all night, but they lost him sometime during the night. But Dan Bush was my roommate for 2.5 years, so he was gone. And it was just unbearable. And I'm looking around, and everybody else is just fucking losing it. Everybody's, it's starting to hit home. We're all in this tent. Then I remember the C-141 lands. And we just heard that Durant has been captured. And they're putting us on C-141 for a medevac flight to Landstuhl, Germany for other surgeries. They just debrided my leg. They didn't reset it. So I go to Landstuhl, and I end up in the room with Howie Wasden, the Navy SEAL, who was on our vehicle together. Me and him were finally able to talk about that day and just hug each other. But the crazy thing was, they take Howie to surgery first, and they cut off my pain meds. So now I'm in pain. I'm fucking screaming now. And Howie comes back from surgery, and he's awake, and he's on a pump now, the button. So he gets out of bed, and he comes over, and he fucking hooks his IV into my catheter, my line, and he gives, that hooks me up, man.
That's awesome, bro. That's awesome.
So Howie Wasden died last year in a plane crash, man. He got his own private plane. He became Howie the SEAL became I ran into him in Atlanta when he was attending Life Chiropractic University. He became a chiropractor, man. That's what he did when he got out. And apparently he did real well for himself on the Georgia coast, and he bought a private plane, and he was flying it and landed in fog, and it killed him. So Howie
sorry to hear that, brother. This sucks.
Oh, yeah, me and Howie became the time at Landstuhl, it was cool, man. And then afterwards, when we ran into each other in Atlanta, it was tears and it was hugs. And he was like, let's go have a beer. And he's like, I ain't going to class, And so from Landstuhl, I end up in Walter Reed. And amazingly, when the bird lands in Washington, D.C., I think it was the 6th of October, and I needed a muscle graft, a skin graft, nerve grafts. I needed some real surgery, bone graft out of my hips to fix my leg because I was missing 3 inches of bone in my left leg. And the crazy thing is the tailgate opens of the C-141. It's pouring fucking rain. And General Dave Grange walks onto the plane, and I'm the first litter, and he hugs me, and he says, Ranger Burns, he goes, I'm sorry we're meeting again like this. Grange was the regimental commander. So we get to Walter Reed, and I got to finish on this note, and then because you're going to spend the rest of your night laughing. So you're about to find out when John Burns went from Ranger Squad Leader to Ranger Legend, okay? And what it is we get to Walter Reed, and I had been I was always a joker, and I told jokes and kept everybody laughing, but I was telling this joke about Bill Clinton. And what happens is we find out that Clinton's coming to the hospital.
Oh.
And my poor mom's there, my dad's there, and they had heard the joke. Like, my mom's like ready to cry. She's like, please, we're going to meet the president. Don't tell him that joke. And all my Ranger buddies having the Delta. You got to tell him that joke, JB. You got to tell him that joke. So the morning the president coming, the Secret Service comes in, checks the rooms, like, here's a bunch of freaking shot up Rangers in traction. Like, what are we going to do? You know? But, so Clinton, I'm in the first bed in front of the door, and there's 3 other guys in our room. Paul Leonard and Pete Nethery was the first platoon guy, and then Scotty Galentine, who was on that Humvee with me, is in the corner, and his family's there. And Clinton comes walking in, and meets my parents, but then shakes my hand, and they take the official picture. And I said, Mr. Clinton, do you mind if I tell you a joke? And he says, son, I've got to go see the other people, but I'll come back. And I'm like, I'm good, man. Right? I tried, right? My Ranger buddies are happy. I tried to tell them the joke. My mom's happy. He doesn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? I'm good. I did what Rangers do. Dude, Bill Clinton goes and sees the other 3 Rangers and their families. He comes back, and he sits in a chair next to my bed. He said, son, tell me your joke.
No way.
I said, Mr. Clinton, I heard that in March 1993, it was the blizzard. We had a huge blizzard in 93, all up and down the East Coast, the South. And in D.C., there was like 4 feet of snow in one night. I said, Mr. Clinton, I heard you walk down on the balcony of the White House in the morning to stretch in your robe, and you look down in that 4 feet of snow, and someone had written in yellow letters, like Pete on the lawn, it said, Bill Clinton sucks, in the snow. And you were mad as hell, so you called the head of the FBI, and you said, his name was Louis Freeh. He was an ex-Ranger, too. Louis Freeh at the time was the head of the FBI, and he said, Mr. Freeh, you've got 3 days to find out about the urine in the snow, the incident on the White House, lawn. And I said, I heard he came back in 2 days, and he said, Mr. Clinton, we got some good news and bad news about the incident on the lawn. And he says, Clinton looks at me, and he goes, let me have it. I said, well, he said, the good news is, the DNA has come back. It's definitely Al Gore's urine. And Clinton says, well, what's the bad news? I said, it's Hillary's handwriting.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So
what did you say?
He laughed his ass off. He laughed.
Dude, I got to give it to him because I'm not a big Clinton fan. I got to give it to him.
I'm in traction. My legs up in the air. And the Secret Service agent, there was a metal bar. He's like leaning over, got both hands like this, kind of leaning in his suit. And when the words came out of my mouth, it was Hillary's handwriting. The dude let go. He almost fell out. He had to go out in the hallway. He lost it. Another guy had to come in. He was laughing so hard. Right? Yo, this is awesome. And now for 30 years, man, people are like, get JB to tell you Clinton joke. You ain't going to believe it. You ain't going to believe it. So, yeah. And Mercer told me, make sure you tell them.
Oh, my God.
So, John Burns, weapon squad leader, oh, yeah, man, I one chance, right? You only get one chance. And And my friends will tell you, JB's humble. I'm humble, man. You know what I mean? I don't worry about it. But I live by another creed. You know what it is? I'd rather be a legend to a few.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I think about that, right?
Yeah.
So why is that? Because you reach legendary status just being yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, heroes, all our heroes, we left in Somalia dead. They were the heroes. Guys that came home. The way to become a hero when you're home is not to forget the Ranger Creed, to never show it.
Yes, sir.
Which is all about the aftermath of Somalia.
Bro, dead on, man. It was better than I could have asked for. I fucking loved it. It was raw. It was good. Yeah, man. It was. I appreciate you, man. Like, I really do. I want you to know, like, this is. I don't kiss people's asses, bro. I was a bodyguard for a long time. I don't look up to movie stars, this and that. But when I was a young Ranger, I wanted to be like you. I wanted to know that if I was in your scenario, I could do what you did and not be scared. And I was I was raised a certain way and I like trained myself my whole life. I was a weird kid, man. Like I literally wanted to do this my whole life. And I've been in some pretty badass and crazy freaking scenarios to where I stood at open intersections to keep my buddies alive and without flinching. And I am very proud of the stuff I did. But with that being said, it was because looking at people like you guys made me feel like as a Ranger, as long as I train, I'm good. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had the courage to do the things that I did. I was very fortunate. Most JTACs, like actually every other JTAC follows their platoon leader around, right? That's just what they do. I never did that. You could ask Sweetie and them. I would be like, when we had a mission, we only had 45 minutes to plan. It would be 3 squad leaders and me. The weapons squad leader would do the routes. The platoon sergeant would do the manifest. The PL would do the one slider. And me and the 2 squad leaders would decide where we were going to where we were going to go into the objective. And I would look at it, I'd be like, okay, well, why don't we do it this way? Because I'll have AC-130, this and that. And if they scored out this way, I can engage them. But if we come from this side, they're going to go into the building areas. Now I'm going to, take civilian casualties. And I was just very fortunate. Sometimes I was with the snipers. Sometimes I was with the assault force. Sometimes I was with the PL. Sometimes a squad would be like, hey, we're going into squad migrants. And I'm like, why? Well, because we have to man BP1. And I'm like, how about I man BP1 and I can have the PL and fucking, because we always have to bring a guest. And he was usually a Delta Force Sergeant Major because we always got fights and he just wanted to kill people. So it'd be me, a Delta Force Major, the RTO, and I would run a BP while calling airstrikes. So, I was very fortunate that I got to like run around and just do things and that's the proudest moment. I'll tell you one more thing before I leave. The one time I cried I cried a lot when I got out of Ranger Regiment, but one of the proudest things I got a lot. I look like a fucking Russian general. None of them mean shit. But the one thing that I was given that put me in tears was if you go to 275 and you go to the ACO 275, the Black Sheep, they have a board. And I remember when I got there, I was a fister, so I didn't belong to them. I would like attached, and all their best 11 Bravos, they put their name tags when they leave. To this day, I am the only one with my name tag on there who was not 11 Bravo. And they're like, Eddie, we voted you in and we put you in, bro. I cried like a little girl, bro. Because that meant my brothers loved me enough and believed in me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's good, brother.
But all right, man. I appreciate you, my man.
Yeah, man. Love you, brother. And look, we'll talk on Sunday. I got a lot more stories to tell you.
I bet you do. And get your boys, man. Bring your boys on board. Tell them to come look at our split stuff and that'd be awesome.
I got it.
All right, brother. I appreciate you, my man.